Hey, Chris.
What's up, Jason?
Just figuring out what's going on.
That sounds like every day of my life.
So, yeah, we are just chatting today. This is the first iteration of a remote Ruby podcast. My name is Jason Charnes. I'm a Ruby dev out of Memphis, Tennessee. And Chris, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Chris Oliver. I work out of St. Louis, Missouri, actually. So we're not too far away, but there's not a whole lot of us Ruby developers in the Midwest, I feel like. But here we are, two of us. And I do GoRails.com screencasts and Hatchbox.io, which is like a Rails hosting product similar in a way to Heroku, but you get to run your own servers and kind of manage your costs a little bit better that way.
Cool. I should also mention I work for a company called Podia. And outside of that, I run Southeast Ruby, which we'll probably talk about in a little bit. And then the Remote Ruby Meetup, which is a meetup that typically happens once a month and is what this podcast is now blooming out of. So, yeah, Chris, what do you want to talk about?
Well, I actually, have you seen the Ruby 2.6 preview stuff?
I saw it was released, and that was about it.
One of the really awesome things in like Python, because I came from Python before I did Ruby. So one of the things we always dealt with was these like, you run your Python script and then you have your .py files, and then every file has its own .pyc file, which is like, they just in time compile it, and then next time you run it, if your code didn't change, it would just load the pyc file. It'd be a lot faster. And it looks like Ruby's kind of going towards doing something like that, which I didn't even know was on the like to-do list at all. I thought Ruby 3x3 was like all that they were working on performance-wise, and like that's where all the efforts were. But this sounds like it's going to be introducing some pretty awesome performance improvements, and hopefully, it looks like not too many backwards incompatible changes. So it might be something that we can all just upgrade to once it comes out, which would be fantastic.
Yeah, I'd heard about JIT maybe at RubyConf last year or RailsConf. I can't remember which one. But I think it is actually part of like the 3x3 improvements in that, like, I think their vision for 3x3 is that by the time you get to 3, it's 3 times faster. So
Okay.
So like every year you get like a little boost of something. So yeah, I'm really excited about it.
Does that mean that we'll have like a 2.7 come out with some major improvements or whatever? Is that kind of the thinking, I would guess?
I would imagine. I know that when Matt's talked about it, RubyConf 2015 maybe, he talked about how there was like no set date. And so I imagine that we'll see. I mean, this is purely guessing. I don't know. But I imagine we'll see like just minor bumps like 2.6, 2.7 until they feel 3 is ready. But I'm speaking out of ignorance. So
Until Duke Nukem Forever comes out 20 years later.
What else is in 2.6?
I don't remember. That was the only thing I really cared about. That was like, I'll take that. Looks like some other little improvements.
Alias. Okay, so I heard about this from Ruby Kaigi. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. I pronounce everything horribly. Yield self. I think Matt's talked about how that he wishes it was named different. It looks like they aliased then as yield self. Are you familiar with yield self?
Yeah, I haven't used it in such a long time though that I don't even really remember like the use case.
Yeah, it's essentially like it returns itself into the next method or next function you call. But
What's that helpful for? Like DSLs or something like that?
yeah, if you have like a scenario too where you have like 4 lines and you like do a method call store it to a variable, pass that variable into another method or another function and store that to a variable.
Okay.
You can just kind of pipe it down. So
I got it. That makes sense then.
I haven't really used it yet because I'm really bad at using new features.
Yeah, I haven't had anything in a while that's really needed an interface or something like that that would benefit from that.
Whoa. Let's see here. An endless range is introduced.
Oh, interesting. So now we can have infinite loops.
It works as it has no end. That's cool.
It's not probably super useful, but it's like, you know, on one hand, I'm kind of like, how likely are you to make a typo and then accidentally add an infinite loop because you didn't type, the end number in there? So I can see why it could be useful, but also I could see like, why wouldn't you just put like an infinite constant or something as the...
I lost you there for a second.
Oh, where was I?
I think you just finished your thought on infinite loops.
Oh, okay. Well, that was kind of where I was going with it. Like, it looks interesting. 3 periods or 1 dot dot. I mean, I don't know. Syntax looks a little odd, but it'll be cool. Finding source location was added. All in all, looks pretty good. It looks like majority of this is internal updates and stuff, so that's good for performance.
Yep. Cool. Well, I guess that is something exciting to. I say something to mess with, but I'll probably not install it until December 25th.
Yeah, I was going to say that comes out Christmas, right?
I assume so.
I would imagine too. That's their tradition, so it would make sense if it ended up then.
I was going to bring up, I saw this on some tweets and then it was in Ruby Weekly, Stripe building a type checker.
Yeah, and it makes so much sense for a company like Stripe. Like, it's probably hard for them to use Ruby when you're dealing with financial stuff like this,
Yeah.
Like, if you screw up anything in Stripe, like, that's potentially very, very bad. So you would want to be very careful. So I'm really excited to see this. It's called Sorbet.
Yes.
And the syntax for it looks pretty nice.
Just pulled it up. Yeah, it's not like too much overhead or...
You kind of just call it right before a function, the signature or sig method, I guess.
Yeah.
It's what defines the signature. And then you just say, I guess you just match you kind of pass in a hash with the variable name and the type on the other side. Looks cool.
Yeah, it's fascinating. There are like, I don't know, it's maybe a weak argument, but like there are times when I am defining like methods and functions where I reach for like name parameters because I don't know. I feel like if I end up with like more than 2 or 3 parameters, it's easy to get the order wrong. But in my head, if you can use something like name parameters or keyword arguments, that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Like with a type checker, like not all the time, but just choose when you need it or you want to use it. I think that might be a cool combo. I don't know. I assume it works with keyword arguments, but I haven't really looked at it.
I believe so. I think you just kind of define which argument and put that as the name. And so that would work with keyword or any other arguments because they all have a name. That seems really handy for anybody building like a gem, especially, right? When
Yeah.
like, or I mean, honestly, like there's so many problems that people have with Rails that come from, okay, you passed in a single instance instead of a relation, a collection of this model or whatever. And there's so many times where you're just like, yo, give me one of these, we'll be fine instead. And if you could enforce that lightly or whatever on the edge of your gem, so that when someone pulls down your pay gem that we both been working on a long time ago that we need to finish, but that would be a great use case of this, where it's like, we don't want to float. And there's a great example there with Stripe. Like, they always use amount in cents, never floats or
Yeah.
decimal. And so like they should enforce that or whatever. And that would be very, very handy to tell you. And I think this comes to like a point of like great gems and libraries are always they always have really good error checking, and the way to do that is to validate your types and all of that in depth, so that you can say, hey, you gave me 99.10, did you mean 90 or 9910
Right.
in cents instead? And then that would be a good place for you to put in like text that's like, hey, we only accept stuff in cents, not in decimals. And you should probably also consider doing that in your application and just visually divide into dollars. Um, that I think is something that's, I guess, just maybe a little bit harder to do in Ruby because we don't have types.
Yeah.
But um, and this is optional, right? Like, it doesn't require you to do this for every method.
Right. I'm
Then
pretty
perfect.
sure. Let me pull their.
I'd imagine it kind of has to be.
Yeah, I'm just going to define another method.
Yeah, currently in beta, Stripe engineers can opt in for it. Written in modern C++. So it must be like a C extension or something.
Yeah, it looks like it is optional because I just defined another method in their playground and then instantiated it, called it with just anything, and it didn't fail. So that's really nice. Kind of like we were talking about, just slowly introduce or pick and choose where you need that. That's really cool. That
Uh-huh.
I thought it was cool when I heard it, but now that we've talked about it, I'm even like more excited about that. So
Yeah. I think there's always that point in Ruby where you're like, okay, some balance of knowing types is important. Like, you have full flexibility. You could give me anything. And if you respond to these methods, it's fine. That's, the beauty of Ruby. But when you're building something that is, the public can use, like Stripe's API, people are going to do weird stuff, and you're going to have so many exceptions in there and try and be helpful, that this makes perfect sense to implement. And then for your internal stuff as well, that's great. Or you think about the size of Stripe as well as a team internally, and so like if you and I are working on something, we can be like, oh yeah, you just got to give me this instead of that type. But with Stripe's team being that large, like, they can't talk to everyone else inside the company, and so you need some level of that anyways, just to keep some sanity on the on the team.
yeah, do you know how much Ruby they're using? I read somewhere that I think they use some Scala, but
I don't know. I know that they used a lot at the beginning. I'm sure that they're using a ton of different things.
sure. I mean, I think it's great they're still using it. So
Yeah, I mean, it's the same deal as Shopify and GitHub. Like, it is more than fast enough for 90% of use cases. And then when you need something faster, you always have the ability to drop into another language. Like, there's always that option too. So
yeah, one of my I don't know if we've talked about this before, but one of the tools that interests me the most is Helix. Have you heard of that?
It's a Rust, like,
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah. So it's a way to write Ruby extensions in Rust. I've never written Rust. I've talked to many smart people who have, but it seems like a cool thing to reach for. Like I've tried to write C extensions, but like I had to learn C while I was trying to write C extensions, and it was hard. So
C is not a great, easy language to deal with, and Rust is going to take care of a lot of those things for you and be a little more familiar. So that would be really good to make that. I haven't used it though. They use it for Skylight? Isn't that what they built it for originally? Like to make Skylight's monitoring service?
yeah, I think so. Yeah. Or yeah. I know they have a lot of smart people doing Rust there. So
Yeah.
anything,
Yeah, that's cool
okay.
one to check out.
Anything else Ruby related you want to chat about before we move on?
I mean, I don't know if people have heard this one. The next story on Ruby Weekly was about HTTP-RB I mean, there's so many different network utilities in Ruby. Like you have NetHTTP, HTTP, HTTP Party, REST client, OpenURI, and so on. HTTP-RB I've been using recently as kind of an alternative to those, and it is fantastic. I really like it. The interface for it's like pretty much, or it's pretty similar to like a REST client or whatever. But if you look at the the benchmarks on it, HTTP-RB like kills everything else unless it's a C extension, and this is like pure Ruby. So,
Gee, I just looked at its like comparison, and on the other end of the table is HTTP Party, and yeah, 40 meg versus a tenth of a meg for uploading 10 megabytes. That's nuts.
And I've used REST client a lot, and I was really surprised to see how slow it was.
Right.
Comparison. And like you can always drop down into some of the other options like Curb I've used before in a Twitter Firehose project where we had to listen to all the tweets coming in. So like that was the only thing that would be 100% like able to keep up with the speed, because I was just like grabbing tweets and then putting them on a queue to be processed later or whatever. So that was like, that's probably the fastest, but it requires you to have curl installed, maintain that, and then recompile the gem if you change curl versions and stuff. And it's a little more finicky to work with, but I was quite impressed with the HTTP-RB. So I just was going to mention that for anybody building something to interact with an API. This might be a good gem to use, although I don't think people take advantage of Faraday enough either. And Faraday is just sort of like a generic interface that you can plug in different backends. And so, if you for whatever reason didn't want to use one of those backends like Net HTTP, you could switch it out for something faster or whatever. That one I think is probably the one that most like API wrappers should use by default, and then you can plug in sort of whatever backend to it. I thought that was cool, and I never really looked into it before, so I didn't quite realize what the purpose of it was until I read that like a couple months ago, and I was like, oh wow, okay, this makes a lot of sense. So it's just like a common interface over all those others.
That's cool.
Yeah. I mean, this is very common, like a common problem when you install the Twitter gem, the GitHub gem, the DigitalOcean gem, the, whatever. You have like 10 APIs, and every one of those gems requires REST client or HTTP party or whatever. And
right.
So you have such an inconsistent set of tools hitting these APIs, and some may be slower, or whatever, and you don't know why. And it might just be that, they were using one of these clients, like REST client, that turns out to be slower than we thought. And that's, I thought, was an interesting thing. Like, I'm probably going to do a screencast on Faraday just to talk about that more, because I think um, it's just not used enough, I think. So that I thought was cool, and glad to see that in Ruby Weekly and more people talking about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Also good to see some Go Rails in Ruby Weekly.
Yep, that's always good to see. Did my direct uploads episode on active storage. It's pretty easy to do direct uploads with it. I really am impressed with that aspect of it. Around how to do some more complex things that were easier to define in Shrine or Paperclip or whatever. I know one of the things that I wanted was, like, have been doing some videos. I want to upload a video and transcode it to the 3 common formats for browsers. But all of the active storage variant functionality is for Minimagic only and for images only. And so you can't go through and say, like, I want a MP4 version of whatever video is uploaded, because there's no a way to plug into that. And I think that's frustrating that isn't flexible enough out of the gate when it came out, because surely people upload other formats. We always need, ideally, an image preview. But what if you're building Audible and you want a 5-second MP3 instead of the full audiobook as your preview instead? So there's, a few of those things where you can work around it, add other attachments, and build your own processing thing. But it would just be kind of nice to be able to, like, say, I wanted this variant as an MP4, and then the backend, like, plugin for active storage knows, hey, if you did MP4, we'll transcode it this way or whatever. I found that kind of disappointing.
Yeah, I unfortunately have not worked in any active storage, so I did not know that.
What's your file uploading tool of choice up until you try active storage?
Let me see what I use on this most recent project.
I think the main ones have been Paperclip, Carrier Wave, Refile, and Shrine, for the most part, unless you're using some third party like Cloudinary or whatever.
I want to say maybe I used Shrine this last time.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see. I change my mind every time I work on a project. I'm like, oh, this one sounds good today. Gem file.
Yeah, I've done that, especially with file uploading tools, because they're always changing.
Oh, I've totally lied. No, I used active storage in this. I used
cool.
it with S3. So I had no favorite before. I don't even remember working on what I work on. So
I don't know if you've noticed, but with active storage, because your files are rendered now through Rails, it's way slow for serving anything, which is frustrating. So pretty much, like, the requirement now is that you have a CDN, and that makes sense for something like, for example, let's say, like, Basecamp or something like that, where you're uploading files for customers and you know that you're going to need to be on a CDN or whatever, and you have the budget for that. If you don't want to pay for a CDN, it is very slow. Like, all of those requests for every file that you've embedded on the page have to go through your Rails application, get then redirected to S3 or whatever, and then sent back through or whatever. And that's, like, I've been uploading videos to my little app that I've been working on, and it just takes them forever to load. And I was like, what's going on? And then I realized, this is not like Shrine or whatever, where they have just direct access to the file name. and they actually just embed the S3 URL on the page. These are like running through Rails every single time, and that's frustrating. Even in production with Puma and stuff, it's slow. Like it's very noticeable, and that's not going to be a great solution for a lot of people. Like I don't. CDNs are expensive, I think, and that I think will be kind of a way for Shrine or Carrier Wave or whatever to stick around and still have a pretty important purpose in the long term, unless Rails somehow ends up redesigning active storage to allow something like that that can skip that.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see how that pans out. I mean, not really related, but kind of related. There was an article on Hacker News today, Gasp, Hacker News, that was it was for static sites, and it was like if you have a static site and you don't have a CDN, you're doing it wrong. And
that stuff is, I mean, sure, like if you need the speed, but if it's your personal website and you got a static site, who cares?
My personal blog is a WordPress instance, and
Okay.
like, don't be wrong, like it's not like it gets like a handful of 100 hits a day, but like it works totally fine. And like many big sites do the same thing on WordPress. So like,
yeah.
I digress. Well, cool. If there's not anything else you want to chat about Ruby wise, what's going on with you, Go Rails wise, Hatchbox wise, anything like that?
Yeah. Well, I've been experimenting with the upgrade in Hatchbox to support 18.04 lately, and for the most part, that's similar. Like every year, or every 2 years, I guess that comes out. I go through that process and like write the Go Rails tutorial and all that. But that's been fun to get the upgrade going for Hatchbox. I've been trying to get it more ready to begin marketing it. I've been working on it for over a year or something and not really marketed it, which is definitely the developer's mistake, being an entrepreneur. But it really hasn't been in a position to be like really tackled by a lot of people. All the little features just end up being way more complicated to support than I realized. Because originally I was just going to do something basic, but then we want Let's Encrypt support, and then that changes in big ways and all this. And so I've been just kind of spending a lot of time making that better, and then getting that to the point where I can say, okay, let's maybe open up a free tier so you can deploy an app for free and try it out and whatever. I think that would be a huge way of growing it and getting more people to try it out and stuff, and doing more screencasts on how to use it. So for the most part, I've been kind of like focused on Hatchbox. I've been moving into my new house, so Go Rails and all that have been in a new environment, kind of echoey and all that. And I got to get my recording station set up a lot better, but those will probably get back to normal pretty soon. But you could tell that I was a little, distracted while I was doing the last few episodes.
Yeah, moving is no fun.
How about you? You started a new job?
Yeah, so started with Podia. If you're not familiar with Podia, we offer a platform for creators selling digital downloads, courses, things like that. And it's fantastic. Small team. I'm employee number 8, and
Wow, that's great.
Fully remote, getting to write Ruby. I mean, I can't complain. So doing that.
Yeah. And full disclosure, I use Podia for selling my Stripe course, which has been fantastic, by the way. Like I uploaded it to Podia and I haven't had to do like hardly anything since, and it just is like probably the simplest and easiest to use one, because I've tried some of the other places and also considered building it myself, and it's like there's no reason not to just use Podia.
Yeah, I actually was a customer before I worked there. I bought a subscription, never put anything on it, but I was like, I was so wowed by the product, it like made me want to do it. Of course, I never did, but
Well, and Mackenzie Child is doing some great design work out there.
yeah, I was there a week, and then we had a team meetup, and I was like, fanboy, like, because I bought McKinsey's design for developers like years ago. And I was like, it boggled my mind. I was like, oh my gosh, I work with McKinsey now. So it was cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And a team of 8. That's great. I
Yeah.
love the teams being that size. Like everybody's still able to just spend a lot of time with each other. And once you get to like 20 and so on, it gets harder. But, at 8, it's just like you can get anybody's attention at any time and be really close to everybody. I think that's really good size.
Yeah, there was on the retreat, there was like equal opportunity for me to like get to have like real conversations with everyone. So that was cool. And it really helped that it was the second week being on the job. I got to meet everyone in person. So
Yeah, that worked out really nice, I bet. Because when you're working remote, it's still great. Like you still get to talk to people on video, but it's just not the same as sitting down and having dinner with somebody or whatever. Like that, there's so much more to it that way.
yeah. Yeah, for sure. So that's been cool doing that.
Been working on Southeast Ruby.
Southeast Ruby. We've got
Did you get through all the proposals?
Yeah, we went through all the proposals. Hopefully by the time this is in the World Wide Web, everyone will have an email. It was really hard this year. We narrowed it down in our first round to about 25, 30 talks. And that we were like, we want pretty much every one of these to be in the conference, but we only had 11 slots. So, yeah, it was nuts. Like, so me, Ernie Miller, and who's helping me co-organize, and Mike Cochran, who is here in Memphis, we just like hopped on a video chat and like I scheduled like 40 minutes to do it. And like 2 hours later, it was like, all right, I think we're almost done.
That's a good problem to have, especially for your second conference.
Yeah, it was really cool. And Ernie,
I really enjoyed the first one. Like it was so much fun.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this year. I was a little late in planning, but Ernie suggested while we were on the call, like bringing in. He was like, "Man, it'd be cool if we could have like a junior developer like look at the talks we've selected and like help us pick some like from their experience." And I was like, I know someone. So like we called my buddy Jeremy up and he joined us. So I think it's a pretty good selection. I mean, obviously, I think it's a good selection of talks this year. Audvi's keynoting. Erin Page is keynoting. She is from Nashville, so I'm really excited about that. My friend, we haven't announced it yet, but my friend Nicholas Means is going to be a keynote, and then we have one more that we are going to announce. And so, yeah, I'm really excited about it. It's August 2nd and 3rd in Nashville, Tennessee. Technically in Brentwood this year, but southeastruby.com. And if you are a Ruby dev, you don't even have to be from the South to join us. So,
yeah, we'll both be there. A bunch of friends. It'll be a good time. It's not the same location this time, right? It's
at Ramsey Solutions Conference Center. So Dave Ramsey's team is like mostly Ruby now. So they've got, I know they have like some Java and some React, but they like really went in Ruby. And so they're big supporters of like the local Nashville Ruby users group. And they came in kind of as a sponsor kind of last minute last year and were just fantastic. And then this year they offered up their conference center, and it's a lot bigger and a lot nicer really, even though where we were last year. So I'm really excited about that.
Sweet. Do you think we'll have more attendees this time? What was last year? Like 100 or something?
Last year was about 100. I hope to do at least like 150. 200
What's
would
the
like be my goal, but
what's the capacity or whatever?
it's huge.
Okay.
We could probably fit like, I don't know. I'm just spitballing here. We could probably fit like 500 people in there if we wanted to. So
Dang, that'd be
yeah.
great.
Yeah. So 2019, 500.
That'd be great. Sounds
Yeah.
like it'll be a good place.
Yeah. I'm excited about that.
It was a little bit cramped last time.
It was cramped and parking was bad. And like the venue was so cool if we had like 50 people there.
Yeah. Yeah. How hard has your conference organizing been? Like you'd never done anything like that before last time, right?
Right. This time has been a lot easier because a lot of people have just like volunteered to help with like planning and stuff. So Ernie Miller he was a keynote speaker last year. He's helping me co-organize this year. And the people at Ramsey Solutions have been fantastic. So like they're not like just like we're going to sponsor, like here's our list of demands. It's like we want to sponsor and here's all the people that we have that can like help. And so yeah, that's been really cool. So they've been fantastic. And then Erin Page, who's one of our keynote speakers, she is like going to put out a call for volunteers like in Nashville Ruby. So yeah, I mean like, and then this year my wife is helping me with like a lot of more logistical things. So really I'm like, I don't even know what I'm doing. So
You just got to be the MC now.
yeah, it's fun. It's cool.
That's great.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I'm glad that we get to do it again. So
Yeah, me too. I had a blast at that one. And I always like the conferences that are smaller because we get to spend more time with people and, chat with, you could shake DHH's hand, but you can't like really sit down and have a 20-minute conversation with them or whatever, just because the conference is so big and all of that.
That happened.
Smaller, I like that.
Yeah. I was talking to DHH and there was like a line of people behind me. So I'm like, okay, what's the one thing we can talk about for like 10 seconds? So I'm not like a complete a-hole to everyone else.
Right.
So,
yeah. That's what I enjoyed about the smaller conferences every time. So,
yeah. So doing that and then finally going to try and make that React course for Rails I've been talking about doing forever. So
there's a lot of people that use React, even though I'm a diehard Vue.js fan. It's definitely just such. Well, I've been using React for a little bit of the native mobile stuff, and that's been great. But there's a lot of things to learn with React as opposed to. I mean, I picked up Vue and was like, I know jQuery well, and that's pretty much all I needed to know to get into Vue, and sort of the same concepts of, you pass in props and there's internal state and that's about it. And it takes care of rendering for you. And like, I learned that from React ahead of time, and coming to Vue is like, oh, wow, like there's nothing here that's too tricky. But I will be, curious to learn more about React stuff from you in your course, because there is no equivalent of React Native for Vue.js that's let's say up to par. It's bad.
Yeah, I was toying around with the React Native app the other day, like nothing serious, and like it is nice because all 90% of the concepts that I know for React from the web apply to React Native, and like I've just never had that experience trying to build a native app before. So.
Yeah, me either. There's not much of the native APIs that you need to know with React Native, which I thought was great.
Yes.
Because a lot of the other, like Ruby Motion is cool, but like if you're not already an iOS developer, like Ruby Motion is not really going to help you. Like you still got to, it's actually going to make it worse because now you've got to go translate all the examples on Stack Overflow from Swift or Objective-C to Ruby Motion, and it just ends up making it worse. It's kind of like a lot of people struggle with CoffeeScript. It's like, okay, well, I can find an example in JavaScript, but now I have to convert it, and it just like doesn't really add much value.
Yeah, I was a big proponent of Ruby Motion when I was trying to build an iOS app, because there's a lot of gems that are really good about abstracting those framework specific APIs out. But then it's like, okay, I'm ready to do Android, and they don't exist for Ruby Motion Android. So it's like, well, this was a waste of my time. So
I've been liking. Have you used Expo at all?
I have. I used it with Create React Native App.
Okay, yeah, I've been using that for. I'm trying to do a video. So I'm trying to. I don't know that I've talked too much about this, but I'm trying to build sort of a third app where doing video support and just adding video into the customer interactions that you do more often. One of the things I was trying to do is build a Rails app with a mobile app that I could record videos on. And so I've been experimenting with all this for that reason. So at some point, what I'm probably going to do is just start recording videos of me working on this, because I think that would be interesting. And maybe it's a way for me to do some launch marketing or something for it. I think it's an interesting concept, but if I go and do all this work and then just release it to the world and hey, here's something new that I've never talked about before, I don't think that will, I've done that before with every other thing I built, and that doesn't usually succeed. So this is going to be a big tangent for me, in my development stuff, because I have to go now learn native stuff somewhat for React Native, but spend a lot more time in React. I know it'll be good, but and I want to do an Electron app for it too. But that hopefully should be easy and not require too much more than here's a browser, embed this website. Yeah. That's my hope, at least.
Yeah, Electrons always interest me. So, but like you're saying, that's I think that's what I want to do with this React course is plug for Podia. With this course, I can set up a pre-launch thing for it, and so I can start promoting it stuff from there. So I think I'm gonna set that up and start trying to put some free content out there, just so it's not I did all this work and I was here it is, world. So
yeah, I think that's great. Steve Shoger has been doing those little snippets of tweets with some little widget he redesigns in amazing ways and explains really, really well. It's been weird to me that there aren't other designers explaining some of these design choices as well as he has. His are so top quality. But I think if you do a similar thing, tweet out those things or post little posts about, here's a little nugget that could be really useful. That'll build a lot of interest, and hopefully when you launch it, it'll be as successful as some of the big course launches. That'd be great. But all that always comes down to you have to just talk ahead of time. Whereas most of the time as developers, we're okay, heads down, let's go build the course. And it's so backwards, because really, if you want to be successful with it, you just got to just talk about what you're doing as much as you possibly can, which seems counterintuitive because you're well, I want to sell the course.
Right.
For free. And truth is, you have to give away 90% of it, and then your course is that 10% that's really well done.
Yeah. So it's kind of, my thought for it right now is it's kind of a course and then there's a mini course intro, because I know when I started React, as a Rails developer, I didn't know a lot about ES6. And so I have my plan right now is a free little mini course ES6 Essentials for React or something like that, where we just talk about coming from ES5 and even CoffeeScript, like specifically for us Ruby devs, like this is why this was introduced, and like this is how it compares. And I don't know, something that I wish I had before I went into React headfirst. So
yeah, I mean that's Rails has not been great about keeping up with JavaScript, and then everybody's like, oh, Webpacker, and then they're like, what is all this junk? And all the React tutorials are always just assuming ES6. You're like, oh, did you know you could do classes now, and you can do like this syntax, and you're like, but it doesn't work in the asset pipeline. You're like, well, it turns out like you got to have these 400 node modules to convert it with Babel and other things to work in your browser.
Yeah, and that's that kind of picks up to where the React course will pick up is like, I want to not only like kind of show you React, but like Webpacker and like how like choosing like a thing I know I assumed a lot was that like when you pick up a technology like a Vue or React, like a lot of times that's really associated with like single page apps, but like it doesn't have to be. And that's where like React finally clicked for me. It's like, oh, I can just like DHH talks about like JavaScript sprinkles. Like I can actually just grab like components and like put them into my Rails app. And like, I don't know. So that's kind of the angle I want to like teach this course from. But
I like that. Yeah. That's where I ended up getting interested in all this, because I like Hatchbox, for example, has like a form which I really needed to sign yourself on. But you go through and you choose where you want your servers to live on DigitalOcean, Linode, whatever. And then you have to choose which account you want to use, which region you want to use, how many servers do you want, which servers has which responsibilities, how big are those servers? Like this form was such a complicated thing that it still is just like a nightmare to like go and work on. Cause like I need to go, and I haven't finished this yet, the editing of that form, because there's also a bunch of these restrictions too. Like I don't want you to really change which server is your database server, because then I got to migrate your database to another box.
Right.
And I might screw that up. And so I want you to do that. These are like a few things where Hatchbox doesn't necessarily help you. And those are things where it's like, look, if your database is on that server, that's fine. Just leave it and like let it grow or whatever. Like don't worry about moving that somewhere else. Or like if you change your load balancer to another server, we got to put your SSL certificates or like redo all that. Or, do we reset it? How does that all work? And so there's a lot of those little things that I was like, oh boy, like creating a cluster is one big massive problem, and then editing one is also another nasty problem. So I like launched it without much editing at all. So I've got to still get back into fixing that. But that was one where I was like, Vue.js, like this will be perfect, because if I try to hide all this with like a cocoon style form, it just is not going to be as interactive as I need it to be, because I need these drop downs to depend on this one, to depend on that one, to depend on this, and blah, blah, blah. And so it made a lot of sense just to use Vue for the one widget, and that was it. And then it submits a JSON request to the server and redirects you, and that's it. So like, that could have been done in Stimulus maybe, but it would have been rough. And those are the cases where, you reach for React or Vue, and you don't need your entire application to be that way. And they can help you by rendering stuff that Stimulus couldn't, and so that I think was the benefit there for me using that over Stimulus or jQuery or something. And it certainly seems to have done a good job, but boy, that took me a long time to get working, and now it's just super ugly, because I was just like, I need this to work before I need it to be pretty. So
yeah,
we'll see.
Awesome. Well, I went long-winded, but yeah, that's what I'm working on. So
Yeah, this is great. Well, let's wrap this one up here because we definitely went on for a long time. And then we'll just do this again like next week or
Yeah.
something.
So if you enjoyed this or you hated it, whatever, let us know.
Yeah, let us know like how long of these you would like to listen to or whatever. Because if it's, an hour, cool. Like, or if it's 20 minutes, great. And we'll just set a timer and like, you know, we'll have a consistent time that we can do going forward. Because I think that would be, if we do these once a week, maybe you can do an hour, but probably more than that, it's going to be really rough. And maybe just like 30 minutes or 20 minutes would be great. So whatever you guys are interested in, I'd be really curious to hear, format wise and all that. So
Yeah, I'm also curious to hear like if there's anything you want us to talk about. Let us know. So
yep.
we are really good at just talking to each other. So
Yeah.
cool.
All right.
Well, I will talk to you later.
Sounds good. Catch you next week.